One thing I think is always interesting with physician investigators or physician scientists is do you think that your clinical work benefits your research? And then, you're on the flip side of that, do you feel like your research benefits from your clinical work? Because you know, each of those are often done, most people only do one or the other. It's a rare, I think it's kind of a rare thing, especially even more so maybe today, even to be able to do both and do both very actively and successfully. So I feel like, do you feel like each of those sides for you benefit from doing the other?
I think for me, it is clearly both. I mean, it's clearly bi-directional, and I kind of, I sort of touched on that when I was talking about like my PhD project was what really got me interested in radiology in the first place. Because
Mm-hmm.
when I started medical school, I didn't really know what a radiologist was. Like, I mean, I think like someone I knew in like middle school or whatever, like her dad was a radiologist, but like that was kind of like all I knew. And so it was not something that like I thought I was interested in. And then my exposure to it through research sort of drove my clinical interest in it. And then my research interests over time now have kind of driven it, sort of flipped the script, and it's kind of going backwards the other way and sort of driving like what I'm interested in terms of research, because I see the clinical problems, and I see like the issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think it works on both. And we do research projects, and I think that makes us better physicians, right? Because we learn more about these specific problems. We learn how to address them, and we become experts in ways that you wouldn't necessarily just from reading a bunch of cases. Like you review 1,000, brain MRs for research, then you get much more accustomed to some of these nuances of brain tumors, and you kind of become an expert in those things. And then it's sort of then you may find new problems in your clinical practice that you want to address in your research.
Sure, sure. Um, okay. And then I guess kind of going to that, you talked about some experiences, obviously when you were an MD PhD student, was there anything in your residency that were you pretty actively involved in research during your residency that kind of kept your, obviously, you did an MD PhD program, you were, clearly interested in doing research. Was there something you did during residency to kind of continue that passion for
To be honest,
research?
like not really. I didn't do much research during residency at all, because it's actually, I mean, even if you try, like it's actually not very easy. And I think they have these online things like Google Scholar and Scopus or whatever, where you can see how many papers you like publish over the years. And like for myself, as well as many people, there'll be like a 3 4 year gap where there's like very few papers, and like because you're busy, like you're on call, you're learning all this stuff. My residency at UT Southwestern had kind of a nascent research track as well, and I was the first resident to like go through that. And it was like something that didn't exist, and I was sort of like admitted to it later, and I was supposed to get academic time, but at the same time I became a chief resident and like took on all of these administrative things. And so I didn't really achieve a whole lot. And some of that is, a lot of that is my fault actually, like because I maybe you're just busy, right?
Sure.
I think you come to grips with like how you can only have so much time and so much effort that you can put forward. But I think it was very hard, and I really only kind of revamped that a little bit towards the very end of my residency. We had a couple of papers, and then as I became a fellow, like kind of wrote up a couple of things too. And then it's hard too, because a lot of these things have like a year or two lag, right? Like you may work
Sure.
on a project, and you may not have an abstract or paper from it for a couple of years, or you may have an abstract like very early and a paper like 2 3 years later.
Interesting. Okay. Um, so I guess based on that, I guess, are there any, I guess, experiences you think, as a resident, obviously there's a research track, at certain residency programs, but are there things, and I'm even just curious from my own standpoint, that you think you can do as a resident to, I guess, further your research training, if you will, or your research acumen, at during as a resident?
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand. I understand both what you're getting at, and I understand like what I think is the best. I mean, I think like the first thing that you can do is probably just take a step back and like be kind to yourself and realize that it's hard, And I mean, I think like a productive like time for a resident would be like if you can have, finish your 4-year residency and have like 2 or 3 abstracts and like one paper maybe. That's a pretty solid like experience for a resident. And anything you do like on top of that is huge. And there are definitely people out there who, have 20 abstracts and 8 papers and whatever, but they're not the norm. And in many ways, like it's not like so desirable for you to do that. I think what you can do is like my best advice, I think, is to just pick up small projects, start small. If there are things that you are working on, just be diligent and work on them like a little bit at a time, like, and make incremental progress and do like a little bit every week. And, by the end, you can have, you can have a couple of papers, you can have a couple of big projects, you can have a couple of small things, because you're not going to have the time necessarily to work solidly for like a week. But if you can set aside, 30 minutes a week or whatever to work on some projects, it's the same as if you work on something like this podcast, for instance, right? Like you start off and you don't have that many and you don't have that much time to spend on it. But if you diligently like do it, every couple of weeks or once a month, twice a month, then over your residency, you're going to have a bunch of podcasts. And it's the same for research. If you can do like one project like every 6 months and get one abstract or 2 a year, by the end you have a lot of projects and like a lot of progress that you can kind of carry into your future and your fellowship.
Sure. I think that's good to hear. It sounds like from what you're telling me, because I think a lot of residents and medical students for that matter get very starry-eyed and think they need to put out 10 publications and everything. And I'm quickly realizing, as a resident, I know it only gets busier as I ascend through the ranks. That you do only have so much time, and research does take time. So I guess it seems like from what you're telling me, it's better to quality over quantity, even though it's kind of a cliche, but I think it sounds like it'd be better to put out like 1 or 2 really quality papers than like 5 or 6 either that are half finished or that aren't even that, high of quality.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is some pressure on residents to put out, I'm not going to say like bad quality. There's pressure on residents to make abstracts because most programs will let residents go to meetings. And so if you can get an abstract in a meeting, you get some time off to go to the meeting, which like both gives you days off and is fun to like go to a meeting, interact with your peers, like meet people and like kind of do stuff. And that's fun. And then, so I think, if you can do that, but then kind of like hang in there, like sort of just push it a little bit further, like see if you can get that paper, like 6 months or a year later. But I think the expectation like for residents is like it's not as high. I just don't feel bad about it, because if you can get a couple of abstracts and a couple of papers, you're doing fine.